Cabbage might not be everybody's favourite veg, but it is packed with nutrients like all green veg really, and you don't have to boil it to death. There's lots of other ways of using it apart from boiling it. Pickling it, a lot of the varieties I've got here you can pickle, and you can eat raw, lovely in salads, grated finely in salads. But the great thing about it as well is that you can have it almost all year round. Very easy to grow, and if you pick the right varieties, you can be harvesting for much of the year, or when you can't harvest you can be storing it. You can actually store some of the lovely big hard summer autumn heads right the way through the winter, almost till March if you want to, or just leave them on the plot if the weather's not too bad. So we've got varieties here which you might sow earlier on in the year. So we've got a variety here called Offenham, which is a really popular variety, and you can sow that from late February into March, and you can either sow it and just use it as a spring green, so don't actually let it form heads but eat it quite young, or let it grow on and you get these lovely pointed heads that you can see there. So that's a nice early sowing one. Another one here called Greyhound, which is a really popular one, and again you'd sow that in the spring to harvest in the summer. That's a really popular one, and again great one for spring greens as well. So you could almost sow it right the way through the year and just eat it very young. You haven't got to grow these things on into great big heads if you don't want to. Another one here, this is moving on a little bit to this real summer cabbage. So this is one that you harvest from July right the way through into the autumn, and it's called Golden Acre, and this is the sort of typical round, really solid heads that you'll find in the shops quite often. And these ones, if you harvest them late, as I mentioned, you can store these to eat well into the cold weather. But talking about cold weather, you get into things like January King, which a lot of you will have heard of, really popular variety. These are the winter cabbages. So these are the ones that you're sowing sort of April, May, June time. Quite slow growing, and they'll mature as you get into the autumn, but they're very hardy, so they'll sit outside for much of the winter really. You'll have to peel some of the outer leaves back, the older outer leaves, to find the nice head inside, but they're well protected, very hardy, and a great winter veg, that one. Something which we don't grow enough of, I think, is a red cabbage. This is great for pickling, the old red cabbage, or for eating raw in salads. This is just one variety called Ruby Perfection, but of course there are loads of others, hundreds of varieties of cabbage in your seed catalogues, so you're spoilt for choice. This is one I like because it's quite compact, so you don't need a great deal of space to grow it. And again, you're sowing it early in the year, so from March onwards really, for harvesting in late summer, then into the autumn. But it will store as well, so if you have got bad weather and you need to cut it because it's starting to deteriorate a little bit, it will store in nets or in boxes of straw for quite some time. So again, another nice one. And then we've got one here which you'd actually sow in July. This is a spring cabbage. So we've talked about summer and the autumn and winter cabbages. This is a spring one, Durham Early, nice pointed head cabbage. Quite often see these in the shops. Really tasty sweet cabbage, and this is one that you'd sow in the summer, so you're talking about July, August time, for growing on and harvesting the following year, so the following spring and early summer. So yeah, you can see you've got cabbages right the way through the year there, for either harvesting fresh from the garden or for storing. One final one here, we've got some Chinese leaves, which is a sort of Chinese cabbage. Quite different. You normally sow this one in the summer, very quick growing, so it only takes about 6 weeks from sowing to harvesting. You can either eat them as sort of almost like salad leaves really, just as young plants shortly after you've sown them and they've come through, or you can let them develop these nice heads here, look much more like a cos lettuce really, or a pak choy than a cabbage, but quite sweet and tasty. As I say, you're sowing those sort of summertime for harvesting in the autumn. They're quite hardy, but they wouldn't stand the whole winter outside. But again, just another take on the cabbages that you can grow. I tend to sow in trays like this, so small cells, single seed per cell, nice multi-purpose compost. This is a wood waste based peat-free compost, this particular one. but just in small cells, and as soon as they've got about 3 leaves, maybe 6 inches tall maximum, they're ready for planting out. So you'd sow them in February, March, end of February, March time, in the polytunnel greenhouse. No heat, don't need any heat at all. As I say, once they've got 3 leaves, they're about 4 to 6 inches tall. Harden them off, so that just means acclimatise them to the conditions outside for a couple of weeks, and then you can plant them outside. Plant them normally about a foot apart if you want great big heads, nice solid heads. Otherwise, why not plant them about 4 inches apart if you've got plenty of plants and you sow more than you need. 4 inches apart, and then harvest every other one as spring greens. Absolutely delicious. In fact, I prefer them young like that rather than the great big sort of solid heads. So that's cabbage.